Welcome to The Audience Connection. This is the podcast where we focus on how businesses can create content that builds more genuine connections with their audience.
Each episode, we dive into the art and science of storytelling, speaking with the sharpest minds in brand, marketing, and creative storytelling.
Our guests share their strategies, insights, and creative choices that made their audiences care.
Brought to you by Casual, the video partner for global brands. With offices in the US, EMEA, and APAC,
Casual leverages the art and science behind creating impactful stories to drive business results for their clients.
we're your hosts. I'm Lydia Chan.
And I'm Ollie Atkinson. This is The Audience Connection.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Audience Connection. Today I'm joined by Nicky Russell, who spent years shaping the creative ops that bring big ideas to life. So Nicky has worked in both agency and in-house teams and brings a rare perspective on what it takes to make content that truly connects. So today we're going to talk about why creative ops are the hidden driver of audience connection and what both sides can learn from each other, and how diversity, vulnerability, and strong operations lead to more authentic storytelling. Nicky, it's great to have you here, and let's dive in. Could you start by giving us a quick intro to your work, your journey, how you got to be here, who's your audience, and how do you connect with them every day?
Do you know what? It's a funny question because my audience, I feel like it's really diverse, I have to say, because obviously I started agency side. I was running operations in agencies for about 10 years. And then for the past 7 years, I've been running my own. I hate the word consultancy because everybody hates consultants. So I like to think of myself as more of a practitioner. I never want to make that consultancy jump. But for the past 7 years, what we've done is I've got my own company now, and basically we are ex-practitioners that help everybody across that creative ecosystem. So that is actually agency, production company, and brands and in-house brands. Work out what the right structures are for them, what the right talent partners are, what kind of talent that they need to build, but also how good creative operations actually is that connective tissue that drives good creativity through it. So at the end of the day, all of us really care about people and we care about creativity. And we do believe that the best way to be able to do that is making sure that there's an environment where people can be the best that they can be. So in terms of who my audience is, it is quite varied. But the thing that I'm really annoying about is, and I have been for a long, long time, is just really shouting about and championing how important creative ops is in that ecosystem. So I think I'd like to think of myself as, if I'm being really singular about it, it's kind of creative operations and creative leaders.
Yeah, and I think that objectivity that you've got, that experience from both sides of the fence is really, really valuable, especially when you are a practitioner going in and helping to reshape these agencies. So
Yeah.
Now you've got that perspective, what would you say agencies and in-house agencies get wrong about each other?
Let's start with agencies. I think the past perception would be that they're enemies. I think there's always a thing that it feels like they're a competitor, and I think that is so wrong. I think if you really look at the best relationships that we have seen, it's when the agency really works in unison with an in-house agency, right? So they work in partnership. And I can really call out two people that I think have modelled it so beautifully, and that's Aidan from Wonderhood and Matt. He was at 3, he's now at AB InBev, but when they were at 3, they worked on that rebrand really collaboratively together, and they were each other's creative ally. At the end of the day, Aidan was in charge of doing all of the above the line, that rebrand direction. And Matt, really truly understood the brand. He understood how to get things pushed through internally. What brands are looking for is they're looking for long-term partnership. And I think if agencies can understand that, then I think they're going to have way longer marriages than these kind of like short-term affairs that seem to be happening a lot of the time with agencies at the moment, because big retainers are quite, they're diminishing, aren't they? And it's more project focused now. So I think it's a new way actually of building a really strong relationship.
Yeah, and I think that we've found that as well when our clients work with us in a far more collaborative way, or, the internal agencies working with us in a far more collaborative way. Just that curiosity mindset, it opens everything up. So we were talking about operations affects the emotional resonance of your final output. Why is that the case?
I think when you think about what creative operations expertise is, and let's make no bones about it, right? It is an expertise. It is a skill. It is a real skill to understand what the craft of the creative process needs, the many interdependencies and complexities that are within an end-to-end process, but also creating an environment where creative people can be disciplined and vulnerable at the same time. And that is really hard to do. And I think people were so in the get work out quickly, it's a bit of production, it's a bit of this. It's a completely different element of what the creative process requires. The actual subjectivity, that deep thinking, that what is needed to really truly hit this objective, and how do I make sure all the right people are there? How do I make sure that they are all showing up in a way in which they can be their best selves? That's hard. And, we've all, we're all creative. I'm neurodiverse, so I'm sure I'm not the easiest person either. But actually bringing people together that all think beautifully differently into a high pressured environment and getting the best out of those people, that is a skill. And I think, when creative operations is applied in the right way and it's allowed to be applied in a strategic way, I think it is the difference between the work. And sometimes I am very dyslexic, so I sort of look backwards. I can look at a piece of work and see what's missing straight away, and I know what's good ops and bad ops, because when people have been able to really put their best selves forward, and it comes through in the work. It just does.
Yeah, you need that real variety in your team. But how do you foster that culture of vulnerability and the ability to fail? How do you go about that in that, like you say, high pressure environment?
I think for me, it's about being a bit of a shock absorber, right? Because how I used to work with my creative teams is I knew what they were trying to get to. I knew what their objective was, and I knew what they needed. And I would do everything I possibly could to ensure that they had the space and the capacity to be able to. And when I say sort of be vulnerable as well, it's like you have to have that psychological safety. You have to come into that room showing up, knowing that 10 things might be wrong, but one thing might be genius. And how do you create that environment where actually being wrong is a part of the process, actually showing up and and not quite having it right, and then have somebody else that can come in and challenge that and build on that thinking. That's what a part of the process is. And so everyone talks about psychological safety, of course they do. But actually, when I think about my role was really as a shock absorber to protect them from anything that would derail what I knew what was needed. And when I used to walk into a room, sometimes my role was, it's funny, my old boss used to say it, he used to say, sometimes you're carrot and sometimes you're whip, Nick, and that's what makes you quite good. But sometimes it would be, a bit of a, what's going on here? But quite often I would walk into a room and I could feel it, and I'd be like, right, they need a cup of tea, they need a sandwich, they need a break, they need to go home, they need a different skill set. I could feel what they needed. And because of that, they trusted me implicitly. I was a shock absorber from the rest of the pressure that's coming around the business. And I just let people get on with their jobs.
Yeah, and I think empathy and trust, isn't it? And what you're talking about is that oversight. And we'll come on to it in a bit, because you've got a theory around a bit of a crisis of talent, and not being in the room with these people is actually becoming really damaging, which we'll come on to. But I hate to drop it into the conversation so early on. AI is disrupting structures and teams already. Sorry. But
yeah, it is.
Do you think it's going to, if the models are being reshaped as we speak, is that going to affect the output? Or do you think AI will be integrated? I saw your post on LinkedIn recently around like, we have to embrace it now. And I'm kind of asking that question back to you, really. Like, how do we build organizations that actively champion people, innovation, and AI, because the temptation by, organizations is to replace people, really.
Yeah. And that is my biggest fear. Because look, we've all gone through shifts that have completely changed the way we operate and the way we think, right? We've all gone through those cycles, and we tend to all, like a huge pendulum swing, go this way, then swing back this way. And the fear is that people are going to think that AI is the silver bullet, and we are seeing it already. Particularly when we're in this scenario where the growth for the UK is just non-existent this year. There's a lot of pressure on cutting costs, and you get this, you can feel the pressure. I mean, I speak to a lot of CMOs now, but they are getting pressured by their CEOs. How is this going to cost us money? I've just made an ad, by the way, in my lunch break in 5 minutes. So why do I need all of this, expensive talent? So I think I see my role and our role at WDC as really being able to educate people that actually, used correctly, AI is going to be a very good advantage, right, for you, your organization, and for your talent. Used incorrectly, it's just going to be another tool that you throw in that people aren't going to adopt, they're not going to use, and it's not going to work. Because at the end of the day, it's people power tech. We're not in a position yet, hopefully never will be, where it's that intelligent, where it just sort of takes over, because I don't want to be in a Terminator world. But it is a collaborator, and it is a tool whereby I think if we apply it in a way in which is sensible, you'll hear everybody turn around and say, get rid of the hygiene jobs, the jobs that nobody likes. And that is true. But the reality is you have to redirect those savings back into creative thinking, because what is going to cut through is storytelling, human emotion. Everything's going to start looking the same. So I think it has to be applied sensibly. I think applied sensibly, it can be really, really helpful. And I think we have to do, and people like I have to do when I'm in those big rooms, speak truth to power, to be able to turn around and say, this could be really good for you, but don't think this is going to be a cost cutting exercise. You have to reapply it, and let's put it back into creative thinking. Let's put it back into investment, because it's not a cost cutting exercise, and it should not be seen as such.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we did an AI challenge internally recently, got everyone in the group to do an AI film, little promo kit for casual. And
Yeah.
I mean, mine was terrible, like really bad. And it took ages to do it as well. So the really reassuring thing about that was we came off the back of it going, oh, you actually do need some skill here. And like all the editors and the people that are really skilled at kind of pulling these things together and our creatives.
Yeah.
It's really a marked difference between what I could create and what they could create. So, I think there's comfort there.
Yeah. And also I think people need to be truthful about it. I mean, I've got some right horror stories of agencies gaslighting themselves. Look at this ad we made in AI, and the studio was sitting there going, no, we made that. It's like, can we just be honest about what this technology can do? Because I think the other thing is that we're turning around and showing this is something that's been made with a small amount of people, when everyone thinks we can have it tomorrow. And that's again where I feel like operations is someone who understands that end-to-end creative process and what's needed in that creative environment, and understands that technology is just another tool, it's another collaborator. That's where I think they can, for me, the role is going to start absolutely rising up, which is insane at the moment, because most agencies and stuff are getting rid of them because they see them as a bottom line cost. But I think it's going to be the thing in the future, because we can't leave those conversations in the hands of people that don't understand creative, because it just won't work.
Completely. Yeah. So going back to kind of like the share between agencies and the knowledge share between agencies and in-house agencies, what do you think, where have you seen an in-house agency really outperform an external agency, and what could external agencies really learn from that?
Oof. There's some agencies out there, obviously, that are doing amazing stuff. Rasmus over at the BBC, Creative Studios, is making beautiful work. Matt Sips and Bites. I mean, the work is awesome. And again, that's why I think it needs to be taken very seriously, because the work that's in there is it's really leveling up. And I think, so there's lots of brands that I think are creating very good creative work. I think the thing to remember is a lot of these brands, they are still working with agencies in some format or other, but the remit of the agency might slightly be changing. So you might have an above the line agency just to take you through big strategic rebrands, or um, big campaign platforms. And actually what you've then got is you've got an in-house agency that can then activate that and keep that thriving for many years. So there's I feel bad only naming a few agencies, knowing I know so many. I feel like I'm going to get told off, but they really are. I mean, the standard of work that's coming out is just unreal. So yeah, there's a few. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's like is there an operational habit that the in-house teams could take from the external agencies? Is there anything? I mean, I guess that's what you're doing every day, right? Is you're pulling that knowledge and.
Ooh, do you know what's interesting? That's a very good question, right? And it will tell you a lot about operations, because the thing about when you have an in-house agency and a brand, they are producing so much different. I mean, the breadth of content that they are producing is extraordinary, and they are servicing every element of the business most of the time. So for the creative operations on their end is a lot more complex. Now, something that's changing is that if a legacy way of working is that it would have been known as marketing operations, because it would have all been what was called, I don't like these terminologies, but like lower funnel work, right? So they would call it marketing operations because it was the stuff that was doing a lot of the hard pushing down the bottom of the sales funnel. Creative operations was always seen as the sexy thing at the top end, all the subjectivity that would have to then think about how you would service the whole ecosystem. Technology is just, and also the rise of the in-house is just gone zip, and it's like zipping these two things together. So if I look at creative operations in-house, they are now making that step change from being what I would call a service provider, because they're in service to, can we have some of this? I mean, it's still creativity, but it's sort of craft creativity. It's not subjective creativity, but they're now taking that on as well. So their creative operations is evolving to take on the lot, where if you're in an agency, you've still only got a small part of that. Do you know what I mean? So actually the maturity of creative operations is a lot more sophisticated now in-house than it ever has been.
Yeah. So let's go back into this item on vulnerability and how diversity is so important. And that's been something you've championed for a long time. You described creative operations as a balance of discipline and vulnerability earlier. What does the day-to-day look like? I touched on it a bit before, but I'd love to dive into that a bit deeper.
Oof. And you know what? It's so interesting that you frame that question as well when we talk about diversity, right? Because for me, how can you represent the full demographic of the people that we're trying to talk to when you're not represented internally, right? When those experiences, you're not bringing those into the room, you're not bringing that around the work. So one of the things that shocked me a little bit, and we have come miles better as an industry, is we had a real problem of class. And it's getting better, but it's still not great, right? And there's lots of different reasons for that. I mean, there was a time when agencies were only looking at, Oxbridge candidates. Do you know what I mean? And I remember when I walked through the door with my working class accent. I mean, how I got through, I don't know. But I just remember thinking, you need so many different perspectives that sit around that. And I think when you are in an environment which is, I need to be careful with my words here, but a bit classist and hierarchical, and you might be somebody that does come in from a working class council estate, and you can't see anyone in the room that looks or sounds like you, it's very hard to be vulnerable. It's really tough to bring your true self. And, that is why we've got a lot of work to do in order to make it accessible for everyone. Because if you haven't got those experiences around the work, how can the work be authentic? Do you know what I mean? So for me, my everyday, like back when I was at agency side, I do miss it actually. I miss the busyness of it. But even when I got to C-suite, I always checked in with the juniors, always. I actually probably wasn't as great with the middle management, to be honest, but because a lot of the time we were bringing up we were encouraging people to come into the business that hadn't been in it previously. So they all did come from a very, very different cost spectrum of life. And I always wanted to make sure that they feel heard, that they feel safe. And no one, when you're creating that environment, it's not that no one's mean or bad. It's just they don't even realize sometimes they're completely overpowering. I remember there was one creative review, and I remember I hired this young producer as an assistant, very nervous, come from not far from where I lived. And she was a YouTube addict, and it was a YouTube brief. And they was having a tissue session, and everyone was up around the wall, and she was sitting down, and there was about 5 men rah, 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 like this with each other. And I just thought, why is no one listening to her? She's the expert in the room. And I remember pulling my counterpart who was in strategy to one side, and I went, what's going on? And he went, oh my God, I didn't even realize. I didn't even know it, So you have to consciously, constantly think about, are you heard? Are you heard? How do you feel? Do you feel like you can speak up? So you're constantly looking at the people that you've got, but you're also constantly making sure that they feel like they can bring their authentic selves to work. And we've done lots of things in order to do that. We've done a podcast so everyone could talk about their story, where they come from, what it looked like, so everyone could get to know each other. We let everyone have a go on the music system, so lots of different things that we've done to try and create a culture where you could get authenticity and vulnerability to get it out in the work.
You talked about mentoring people and having those voices in the room when, there's a load of people talking and you need that person from leadership to speak to the person and bring them in. Is that an experience you had when you were coming up? Where have you learnt that?
I think I'm naturally like that anyway. I think I'm naturally quite nurturing. Obviously, my background is weird compared to most people in the industry. Like, obviously, I used to run a football club in my 20s. It was an interesting insight because the club had, 20 odd teams. And each team, if you're familiar with how a grassroots football club operates, each team will have the manager, the assistant manager, first aider. You have all of these people that show up every week, and they don't get paid, and they are sacrificing time for something that they love. And I think for me, it was my first real lesson in culture. And in some ways, there's a lot of similarities between that delicate ecosystem of people that are showing up again and again and again for something that they love, and creativity, because people are in this environment because they really love it. They really care about it. They're passionate and curious about it. And it's a tragedy, really, that there's a lot of working class people along the spectrum that just don't even know there's opportunities, what kind of creative and production jobs are in advertising, because they just they're not exposed to it. And that's disgusting, really. I was incredibly lucky in that my first 4 years was under Niels Leonard, and no matter how many people were in that room, Niels would turn around to me as the most junior person and say, I want to know what Nicky thinks. And it was so powerful, and I learned so much from him. And for me, I had no legacy behaviours of advertising. That was my first look at it, but I came to it with all that experience of the football club, all of that understanding how young people operate and what makes them tick, and also knowing how to do digital, operational transformation. So when I had my turn to kind of move up quite quickly in the ranks and do the operations how I felt I saw fit, I took the best bits of what I saw. And so I have to give Niels a lot of credit as well, because he was the first person I really learned off of, and he wanted everyone's opinion. So yeah, I've got to give him some credit there too.
Yeah, it's really important. And I think we ran a thing called the Casual Academy, which is our charities part of the business, and that's all getting disadvantaged young people into filmmaking. And
Right.
It's just so satisfying to see someone come into the academy with not even pointing the camera the right way, and then end up going to BBH and winning awards in Cannes, and going on to do amazing things. And that it's so important to do that.
Yeah.
And then I think from a brand's perspective as well, Who do they think their audience is going to be like in the future? You need to get young people into the businesses, right? Into the thinking, because that's who you're going to be targeting.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about this kind of talent crisis that you were talking about before.
I'm going to get on my high horse now and start trotting along. I'm really passionate about young people, and I'm really passionate about how we bring them up. And we've got to look at where we are. Like, what's the context of where we are now as an industry, right? COVID was 5 years ago. So, which is just insane when you think about it like that, right? And when you look at what was happening with a lot of those young people that were coming into the industry, they would have immediately been put on furlough, right? So they lost big swathes of their career as they're going through these big furlough sessions. All of the agencies and everyone was under so much financial pressure. They were getting rid of a lot of that, senior management. Also, all of the kind of like expensive heads were gone, right? Were cut. And then they've come back to hybrid working. So where are they learning? Who are they learning from? And it's I hear horror stories of, agencies that have just got rid of all of their senior talent. They've got all these young adults who are desperately, trying to find their way with no operations that are helping them with that craft of what that looks like. And I just think we need to be really conscious of doing the right thing, because they're going to leave, right? And if they're going to leave, because one of the things I loved about the young people that were coming up from a non-lead point of view is that they really knew their own mind. Right? I know they get a bad rap, but they've got a strong moral compass. They know the difference between right and wrong. They know what they want, and I love that tenacity about them. And it's we're going to lose them. And I think, and then what is going to happen if everyone's doing the AI race and then they realize, oh, actually, we need storytelling that's going to cut through? We're going to turn around and we'd have got rid of all of our seniors, and the youngsters they're not going to be disinterested. We're going to burn them out. So I think we just need, as an industry, to be really conscious of this is where we are, and how do we ensure that we are wrapping our arms around the kids that are coming up, no matter what discipline that they are in. Give them our time, be generous with our expertise, share our DNA, and just help them, because this industry is exciting and it's fun and it is rewarding. And we need to just make sure we are creating that environment again where we're appealing to them, because guess what? They want to go Netflix and they want to go to all the sexy brands. They don't want to start coming into agencies anymore. And that's a tragedy. So I am passionate about it. And I think it's something that we all need to just, check ourselves on what can we be doing better.
And as AI comes in, I think it's just a good sort of MO for everyone to actually, be quite open, share best practice, and try to figure our way through it. And yeah, wrapping our arms around them is the nice way to put it. In terms of I think we touched on this previously, but the psychological safety side of it, how do you create that safety for people to try something, especially in this age we're going into? How can someone try something and feel like they're not going to be under threat?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's just set the context, right? It's not just even the creative environment at the minute. Let's just set the context of where we're living at the moment. Things change and move at a breakneck speed. So, technology is moving so quickly. The way we're working is moving so quickly. I think if we can reframe the environment that we're in so that there is no such thing as failure, actually. There's only, we're in a kind of test and learn environment all the time. We're always optimizing, right? We're always, testing and learning is the kind of, I think, the right approach to look at it. If you go into it if you reframe things with that mindset, then you can kind of sort of go, everything is about learning. Every day we are actively learning how to optimize and how to move with the times. It makes things less scary. Do you know what I mean? When you think about failure, because when you think about failure, it's like, here's the expectation and you're not meeting it. If the expectation's constantly evolving and moving, what actually can you reward then? Right? What you're rewarding is showing up and trying again. and, not getting it right the first time. And you know what? Not only is that not okay, actually, we have to be able to turn around and go, yeah, that's a part of the process. A part of the process is getting it wrong. And that's okay. That means you're doing it right. And I think if we can reframe everything like that, I think it's going to make everyone feel a lot better about showing up and not showing up always in a way in which they feel this isn't right and this is wrong. So I think obviously there's things you can do, like I was talking about earlier with being a shock absorber, when you create that vulnerable environment. But I also think you need to create a culture where, failure isn't in the vocabulary, it's not in the vernacular, right? It is it's about optimization and showing up. And I think if you can have a culture that does that, then no one's ever going to feel like they're doing something wrong.
Yeah. It's really powerful when the culture's tight and it's working. It's unstoppable.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the operations side and how that creates authentic content. You mentioned cancer research project, your campaign that you worked on, and you could really see the connection between the ops and what actually ended up on screen.
Yeah. So when I was at Anomaly, we had a brief that, we had cancer research brief that came in. And our creative director, Ollie and Alex, actually, they were both there at the time. Basically, we were shifting the strategy from beating cancer in the future, which felt a little bit unachievable, to your money can make difference now in lots of different moments. So it felt more urgent. And the comm strategy was that we needed, every time you interacted with a piece of media from them, it had to be a different piece of media. So the power was in the breadth of what you were seeing. So each, and Ollie said to me, I want to have this window into people's worlds, right? Whether or not they're raising money, they're in chemo, they're in the doctor's surgery, getting good or bad news, people are waiting for loved ones out of theatre. I want the full spectrum of emotion that goes with this complicated journey of cancer. And I want it all to be real people, and I want it to be immediate. And I just remember sitting there thinking, oh, what? I could see.
Okay, that's great. I'll see you later then. Yeah.
See you, mate. Yeah. I was just like, wow. And actually, for phase 2, we did do our first live inside the human body, right? So he did get his live moment in the end. But we had to make it as live as we possibly could. And we went to... so straight away, any kind of traditional way of working is thrown out the window. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so we went to the makers behind production companies. It was the makers behind 24 Hours on A&E and One Born Every Minute. So I think that was the Dragonfly and
The Garden.
And The Garden. What become apparent really quickly is that their process, was completely different to what our creative process would be. And when you look at the results of that campaign, their donations went up 40%. That campaign lived for 7 years. They've only just changed it. I think they changed it last year. So in terms of a campaign platform that worked for them, it's been life-changing for cancer research. And, when I look at it and I think about the role that creative operations played in that, I think it was instrumental. And I think that's the thing, when it's applied in a way where you understand how to help these people in this ecosystem and where to bring in the right skills and what to do. I think that's when I know I'm sounding like a producer at that point, and it is producing, but you're looking at that ecosystem piece. How does this workflow integrate in with the in-house team at Cancer Research? What does that look like? So it's such a wider job to be done, and it's probably the thing that I'm most proud of.
Yeah, it really resonates with me because my background is in TV and rig shows, and I understand what it takes to orchestrate something like that. So from a producer standpoint, and so I think, and it also speaks to that point, which is around brands need to become a bit more like broadcasters in terms of how they're putting that story out, and there are really amazing stories if they go more down that sort of documentary route. There's such powerful stories that they can tell, and the longevity of that campaign, it says everything really.
Yeah.
Okay, so audience of one, we're gonna do it. We do it every show. when you're creating a piece of content or a piece of comms, who is your audience of one? Who's that person that comes to mind that you want that piece of content to really resonate with?
Yeah, I definitely want to connect to and hopefully inspire the young, the youth, the kids, as we were talking about earlier. But also somebody, I hope when I walk into a room and I talk about creativity, I hope they leave it understanding more about it, what's required from it, how to protect the people that are in it, and understand that it's not just another way of working. It's not another way of working. It's not a product. We're not making a car. We're talking about people and how do we get the best out of people and how do we create that environment that ensures that you're protecting the people in that environment. I really hope the majority of the meetings that I go into, when we start talking about going on this journey about building creativity, that they come away going, I feel the sense of a responsibility to do this properly. Otherwise, I don't want to do it. And so if there's one message that I would like to land, it would be that, because it's a big thing to take that on. And as we were talking about the vulnerability and about how you bring those people in, you have to have the responsibility to do it right. So hopefully that is something that I do land, and I am quite punchy about it.
I'm sure you are. I can imagine it lands every time. You got to live and breathe it. It's true.
Got to live and breathe it. And the thing that I always say as well, when I sit into like a bigger brand that might have if you're a telecoms brand, right, and you go into HR, they have a similar HR process for everybody that's in that, I don't know, 10,000 person company. And my thing is always, you cannot assume that how you treat product is how you're going to be able to treat creative, because when we're building teams, I sort of say, look, they're not going to pass your psychometric test. A lot of people, they're neurodiverse, they are dyslexic. You want those people because that's how you're going to get the creative thinking, but it's not going to fit within that framework. So if you try and squash this in, not only is it not going to work, you're going to foul the people. And that is something that I just don't, I feel passionate about not letting happen. So if you do it properly and understand that what it's going to take in order to be able to do it and nurture it.
100%. Well, look, Nicky, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's been wonderful talking to you. And yeah, we'll see you next time you want to come on.
Thank you ever so much for having me. It's been great.
Well, that's it for this episode of The Audience Connection. I think what really stuck with me is how much of creative success comes down to what you don't see. It's the systems, structure, and the care taken behind the scenes. Nicky's reminded us that creativity isn't just about the spark, it's about the environment that allows us to thrive. If we want our content to resonate, we need to invest in the people, processes, and principles that make it possible. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.